The Age of Gold had a significant impact on American history through its causation of westward expansion, economic flourishment, and the great impact it had on social classes. The gold rush caused westward expansion, which later impacted American history. This quote by Brands says, "The country was filling up. Where would all the people live? What fields would they farm?" This really shows how huge of an impact expansion had on America and on westward expansion, because people were traveling to California in order to try and mine for the gold, and there were so many people that were migrating that people were concerned about what fields people would mine and like what land they would have and how land would be distributed and all of that. And then in this primary source document of a Chinese theater during a great historical play, the artists Davis and Spear are the people who did it. It shows how diverse like the migration was and how people from all over the world really were traveling to California in order to try and find gold and become rich, American dream, stuff like that. In this other quote by Brands, it says, "Yet the tinder refused to light, and Fremont continued north to the vicinity of Oregon's Klamath Lake when he waited impatiently for an excuse to return." This was talking about him waiting for an excuse to return to California to mine for gold, because everyone wanted to get rich and mine for gold. That way they could live a successful life. So the American Gold Rush also impacted American history through its causation of westward expansion, because without like the drive for gold and the drive for everyone migrating west to California, everyone might have just stayed on the East Coast, and very few people would be aware of like all the natural resources that are weighted on the West Coast and in between the East and the West Coast.
The Age of Gold elaborates on the substantial impact that the California Gold Rush had on the American economy. For such items as he purchased, Sherman had $28,000 in cash. This seemed sufficient for a long stay, as prices were low. Horses ranged from $4 to $16 apiece. Beef cost 2 cents a pound, said Brands on page 38. Due to the abundances of natural resources during this time period, overall prices were low. In this painting by Francis Samuel Marriott, dated in 1855, shows a horse market in Sonora. The man selling the horse appears to be holding up the number 25, as in $25 for the cost of the horse. This price is very close to the range given in the previous quote. But what kind of employment? That was the question that confronted most miners sooner or later. As the scale of mining operations increased, the opportunities for individual miners diminished, said Brands on page 239. Although the California Gold Rush reduced opportunities for individual miners, it created an infinite number of other working opportunities, since many people left their jobs to mine in the gold fields. It allowed many people who desperately needed jobs to receive one. In this painting by Cham, dated in 1851, demonstrates the actions of people going to California for financial purposes. Overall, in the economic world, it flourished due to the gold rush. Newly formed banks and financial institutions, trade, manufacturers, etc., were all categories that contributed to this economic flourishment.
The Age of Gold also discusses the social class aspects of this time period, which also had a significant impact on American history. Alvarez spoke no English and the Americans spoke no Spanish, but when they wrapped a rope around his neck and threw the loose end over a tree limb, their meaning became clear, said Brands. Slavery and the demand for slaves increased. People viewed African Americans / slaves not as people, but as meaningless things that they could kill with no remorse. This quote analyzes this, especially in its final line when it states, "Their meaning became clear." In this article published by Harper's Weekly in 1879, it demonstrates the discrimination that both African Americans and Chinese faced in America. The caption at the bottom of the article reads, "The nigger must go and the Chinese must go." Later on in the novel, Brand said, Semple suggested that in the absence of a ban on blacks, the southern states would dump their unwanted Negroes on California. "I can assure you, sir, thousands will be introduced into this country before long. If you do not insert a positive prohibition against them in your Constitution, an immense and overwhelming population of Negroes, who have never been free men, who have never been accustomed to provide for themselves, what would be the state of things in a few years? The whole country would be filled with emancipated slaves, the worst species of a population, prepared to do nothing but steal or live upon our means as paupers." This quote encompasses much of the impact that the social classes during the gold rush had on American history. Semple discusses how emancipated slaves are the worst species in the world. He specifically uses the word species. Semple refers to slaves as a species that is somehow lesser than himself. Problems with slaves and social classes later contributed to bigger problems, such as the Civil War.